The Oklahoma Sooners are bringing in a former Georgia Bulldog, former 5-star prospect, and it's kind of intriguing, Jay. We'll discuss that coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Thanks again for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. Shout out to all the everydayers out there. Tune in and subscribe to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all podcast platforms. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. The Oklahoma Sooners are welcoming in a former recruiting target, part of the 2022 recruiting cycle, Marvin Jones Jr., who was the number 2 edge prospect in the 2022 class, according to 247 Sports, and was a 5-star prospect. Spent a couple years with the Georgia Bulldogs, spent this last season with Florida State, where he did have 4 sacks, 6 tackles for loss, a little bit better year than what he had had at Georgia. So, Jay, what do you make of Oklahoma welcoming in Marvin Jones Jr. for a visit?
Well, it looks like Oklahoma's taking the portal seriously. I mean, there's been talks of wondering if Oklahoma, we just talked about it last segment. You know, we're only going after these small school kids. We're trying to be cheap. We're playing the Moneyball game, in which everybody's not looking at the fact that you told us before, the Moneyball game is not about the cost. It's about the production. We're going after guys to replace pieces of production or whatnot, and not going to look at the cost. Well, a player that played at Georgia and Florida State, you'd expect to be probably pretty expensive, and that's probably a possibility. But we got him on campus. He's visiting right now. It's been reported by Matt Zenith over there, 247. You know, everybody's talking about it right now. That's huge for Oklahoma because we're waiting on R. Mason Thomas to make a decision. We just got Dominic to go ahead and say that he back in. We just think that Robert Spears-Jennings is added in there. We kind of need one more guy that can play like the Ethan Downs role on the defensive line at the edge, so that you can continue to develop and play a PJ Adebaware and a Danny Okoye, who the two that you truly expect to play the most. John, that's a big deal, right? Miguel Chavis has got himself a nice potential piece that could be great for him to mold, and really, this would, to me, solidify him as a developer. If he was to get a player like this and get him to be as productive, he had 4.5 sacks last season at Florida State. If he comes in here and he's able to produce that, if not a little bit more, that does nothing but propel Miguel Chavis in the recruiting trail to show, hey, I got a guy at Georgia and Florida State couldn't really get going like they wanted to. I was able to get him a lot higher than he was before. And at this point, it feels like Marvin Jones Jr. is looking for a good redemption story. And this is probably the best place to do it.
Yeah, kind of the buzz out there right now is that he just may not have been great fits for Georgia and for Florida State. And I'll be curious, is he going to be a fit for Oklahoma? Is he going to be a dude that's going to be willing to be, coached hard by Brent Venables and a Miguel Chavis? Because they demand a lot. They ask a lot of their players. They're not going to, roll out the red carpet and just make life easy for anybody. I mean, look at Danny Stutzman. Danny Stutzman was a cornerstone piece left over from the Alex Grinch era, and Brent Venables challenged him immediately. Like, are you going to take your craft seriously or not? And if not, then we need to know that. But if you are, then you could be great. And Danny Stutzman turned out to be great. And so, like, if he's willing to come in and listen to what the coaches have to offer, then he'll have a chance to put all the tools in the toolbox to use and be a productive player at the collegiate level. But just kind of the buzz that we're hearing from, guys that cover Georgia and cover Florida State is, to this point, he hasn't necessarily been willing to do that. But perhaps a new home, a coach that was recruiting him while he was at Clemson, Brent Venables did recruit Marvin Jones Jr. He ended up going to Georgia. I think it's an intriguing possibility here. I think it's a guy that has a lot to prove, because when you're the number 2 edge player and you're already working on your third team, to me, you still have a lot to prove. 3 years removed from your 2022 recruiting cycle. So I'll be fascinated to see how this ends up. I think he's got all the tools to be great. It's just a matter of whether he's willing to put the work in to make himself great.
Yeah, that's the big question is where is his head at now that he's going to his third school? And, I don't knock on guys that's been to multiple schools when it comes to the portal.
No.
You've seen some actually break out, and this could be the opportunity he's looking for to really get his mind right and really get him going. In some players, you run into a situation where they're kind of being pushed out because it's like, you really didn't work out. For him, going from Georgia to Florida State, that Florida State whole debacle, that was wild, right? You bring in DJ Uiagalelei, and the offense was non-existent. And so when everything just started to tank really bad, I mean, did they win a conference game this year? That's the bad part, right? It kind of like Oklahoma State. It's just they didn't even win one. At least we won 2 of them, and we own the state of Alabama. So I'll be happy with that. But with that situation was just as brutal as it was. They thought that he was going to be the next Jared Verse. Jared Verse, and then Braden Fisk comes in from Wyoming, in which, nobody liked him, even though I really wanted him at Oklahoma. Those two dominated, right? On that line for them to go 13-0. I thought MJJ could have been that for them. It just, unfortunately, the offense didn't allow the defense to be any good. But I do think that coming here with the defense that's as solid as ours, and now with an offense that we expect to be at least 10 notch higher than what it is. I mean, it was awful last year. As long as it gets into the 80s, we'll probably be satisfied. But that will make the defense even better because that's a competent offense. Get the offense competent, and you keep your defense. I think Marvin Jones Jr. could do some special stuff. Like I said, this should just be a feather in the hat for Miguel Chavis.
Well, and I think if you do have R. Mason Thomas coming back and you add a guy like Marvin Jones Jr. to go along with Danny Okoye and Adepoju Adebawore, you have the potential to have a bookend defensive end duo like they've got at South Carolina, like they have at Ohio State. There's the potential there for it to blossom into that, to grow into that. You still need a guy that's dynamic off the edge, opposite of R. Mason Thomas. Again, expecting that he's going to return. If you don't have R. Mason Thomas coming back, you definitely need somebody with some snaps under his belt at the collegiate level to be one of your edge rushers. But if you really, to be competitive and to assert yourself as one of the better teams in the SEC and potentially make the playoff and go on a playoff run, you're going to need to have a really, really good pass rush to make it happen. And right now you've got a pretty good pass rush. I think you're really, really good against the run. Your pass rush is pretty good. It needs to take a step up in a couple notches so that you can become great and then help transform this defense to a pretty good defense to a great / elite defense. You still need some help on the pass rush to make that happen.
Yeah. You need some age. And you need a veteran that has an ability of setting the edge. And that's where the question lies. Is Marvin Jones Jr. capable of doing that? Does he have the ability, the motor? Is he ready for the work? Is he ready for the grind that's going to come from that? I'm not going to say he's not. And I can't say he is until we get him on the field. But it feels like the staff feels good about him if they got him in town. That's probably the most important thing. You get him in for the weekend, you're making some proper moves. And so let's just hope that if he does work out in the conversation that we close the deal.
I mean, what does Brent Venables always say? You recruit your problems, right?
Yep.
So if they're actively recruiting him, they must believe that there's something to him that they still can unlock, that they believe that they can be the difference in finding the player that everybody wanted to have out of the 2022 class. And at this point, on the defensive side of the ball, I trust him. I trust them inherently to make the right choices with their evaluations. So we'll see where this goes after his weekend visit. I'm sure he'll have more visits after this. It's not going to be a recruitment that's done anytime soon. Maybe not. Maybe it'll be done after this weekend. We'll see. But if Oklahoma can land that, that'd be a big feather in the cap for the Oklahoma Sooners defense moving into 2025. Another feather in the cap, Michael Fasusi having another big day at the Under Armour Next camp. We'll discuss coming up next here on Locked On Sooners.